Welcome to the Down South Hunting Podcast. I'm Adam Cruz with Mike Higman. It's November the 1st, the day after Halloween. We've all been jacked up on caffeine and candy. Mike, how was your Halloween night?
Man, it was pretty good. Pretty good. You know, it's supposed to be such a fun day, but the craziness of getting kids ready, and my wife is used to be a photographer professionally, so she's got to have good pictures for everything. And it's like herding cats trying to get kids in costumes and that kind of stuff. But we got that all in. It was pretty good. How about yours?
It was pretty good. I went dressed up as Lane Kiffin, which will not be the next football coach of Tennessee, but anyone, insert name of anyone, will be better than the current Butch Jones situation on the Hill. So I had a good time with that, telling everyone Grudenite. No one gets my John Gruden jokes, but yeah, we had a good time. I got a couple of Jedis, and my wife, she went as a pregnant lady, so that was pretty cool.
Okay.
Any cool stories to go along with Halloween?
Yes, I got to ask you, though, how do you dress up as Lane Kiffin?
So I just dressed up in like khakis with tennis shoes, awesome Tennessee sweatshirt, and you know, I'm always looking pretty good, I feel like. So, you know.
So it's one of those costumes you like have to explain who you are because they're like, dude, why are you wearing khakis?
And I did have my podcast headset on.
Oh,
so,
yeah,
you know,
okay.
I had a headset. So people were like, who are you supposed to be? And people were saying, you know, are you Butch Jones? I'm like, heck no, which I should have worn a name tag, I guess. But either way.
Okay, real quick college football thing. Would you seriously want Lane Kiffin back after he dumped you guys?
Yeah, we've moved on. I mean, we had some issues, Lane and I did, right after that. But
Yeah.
I mean, he's grown up a lot. I'm emotionally, you know, in a better place now. So I think we'd be good together.
Man, we both follow some terrible college football teams this year.
Yeah, how many games have you guys won?
We've won 3 games. We beat, who did we beat? We beat Wake Forest, we beat Duke, and we beat some other team that is no big deal to beat. I can't even remember. No, that's right. We've only won 2 games. That's why I can't remember.
Have you guys played Georgia Tech yet?
We don't play Georgia Tech this year. Yeah, they're in the other side of the division, so don't need to worry about losing to them. Yeah, it's crazy, man. So normally I'd be wanting to talk all kinds of college football and what's going on, and now I just want to forget about it and talk hunting.
Yeah, kind of the same way.
Well, let me tell you my Halloween story real quick. So we're going around the neighborhood, and we're getting kind of close to the end. My son had found a frog, and this is funny. He put it in my mother-in-law's boot by, like, her permission, was going to allow him to keep this frog earlier in the night. We're getting kind of close to the end. He started complaining that his eye was bothering him, and he kept saying it was like hurting more and more and burning, and like he started screaming about it. So like I started to run him back to the house. And on the way back, it had occurred to me that they had been messing with this frog, and it was a Cuban tree frog, and apparently they like have secretions that like can, you know, burn your eyes and irritate your skin and all that stuff. So that was the end of my Halloween night, calling poison control, and you know, he's fine. Just had to flush it out. Yeah, it was not a fun end of the night to him, but that's the fun of having 4 kids. You never know what's going to happen. There's always good times to be had. Not even 4. Probably any parents out there know that this kind of stuff, you know what it is? It's like holidays. One of the only times my kids have gotten stitched, I think one time my kids got stitches, of course, was like Thanksgiving Day. So you got to go to like the ER instead of, I don't know, whatever I guess maybe you go to the ER no matter what. But that one was, I think the deductible on that was like $1,000 or something like that.
Oh, man, yeah.
Crazy.
Hey, I have a home remedy for this. Are you ready for it?
For Cuban tree frogs?
For Cuban tree frogs, any kind of infection in the eye, anything that's going on with your eye.
Okay.
Hold on. Breast milk.
We don't. We're all tapped out on breast milk right now, man.
All you need to do is find a lactating mother, and you're good. You just get some, you throw it in there. You
just wander the neighborhood. Hey, you look like you might be lactating.
Well, you just find a woman with an infant. You're good to go. Be like, hey, You got an extra bottle?
I think flushing with water for 15 minutes sounds like a better solution in my case, man.
Well, anyways, for the other listeners out there, you might want to try this remedy out versus going to the emergency room. Just,
Yeah.
Throwing it out there.
Okay. Thanks for that.
I don't know how we got here. Yeah, sorry, man. Speaking of
So we're
Halloween,
doing a hunting podcast. Yeah.
we could get a lot deeper. I kind of feel like Steven Rinella now. We can get way off in the weeds.
What's the origin of breast milk, Adam? Maybe we can. How did they cross the continental divide?
Oh.
Anyway, I guess that's inside podcast jokes for people that listen to Rinella, but sorry to everyone else.
True. Sorry for my comments as well. All right, so moving on. Talked about Halloween. Let's just really quick go over hunting plans for this weekend. Do you have any plans? You going anywhere?
Yes, I'm really, really excited about this weekend. It's just going to be basically a doe hunt weekend with my brother-in-law, my dad. I got a nephew and niece, and bringing a couple of my kids. So basically, it's like we're going to try to go out and slam this weekend. It's the opening a gun. And it's in Florida. You can't shoot does year round unless you either have permits or that's it. So, but it's a doe weekend where you can shoot does this weekend. So that's going to be the goal this weekend. Of course, I'd love a nice 10 to step out. I got some great trail cam pictures. I don't know if I told you that.
Yeah.
Prior.
You just hadn't posted them anywhere yet.
Yeah, social media, man. Anyway, so this weekend I'm really excited about. What about you?
I'm kind of strapped on time. I got some family coming in town, so I'm not really sure the days and like the sits that I'm going on, but I know exactly where I'm going. I'm gonna hit up some of these islands. Most likely going to have to use my kayak because my buddy Brandon, he's got something else going on, so it's going to be all me on the kayak. And I would go to my private land spot because we are in November, and I basically kind of held off until November to hit this one spot. And so anyways, I don't know if the viewers just heard that, but I accidentally left my cell phone on. Not a good idea. And that was ringing. But yeah, I'm going to hit the private land when it's colder, and we're actually getting some warmer temperatures running through here. So it's going to jump up to 70 degrees over the weekend, and not really the ideal conditions. Not really expecting the deer to be in the full-blown rut, more of like pre-rut from what I'm hearing from other people and different sign that people are seeing. So I'm going to hold off on private land, just do some public land.
Yeah, well, just don't be too picky, because I want to see the picture of a buck hanging across that kayak. I think that'd be really cool. So
would a doe work? Because I think I'm going to a doe spot.
Shoot a doe, man. I just want to see a deer laying across the front of that kayak. And I want to see the results of you trying to paddle with the deer on the kayak.
I was looking at it last night, so I got some gear storage underneath my kayak that I can put in my hole. So I'm going to throw some stuff under there. But, man, getting this deer strapped down, it's just going to be a little bit of a bear, especially if it's like a legit good-sized buck. I mean, I may have to take a kayak or ride back to my truck, drop all my gear off at the truck, and then come back and get the deer. Would probably be the safest thing to do. However, I know me, and when the situation comes down to it, I'm going to be like, oh, yeah, I can do this. And I'm sure I'm going to get wet, but we'll see. Of course.
That's part of being a man, right? You have to do everything in one trip.
It's like the grocery bags and having 20 bags on your arms.
Yes, like why are you gonna walk back out to the car if you could just sling 4 more bags over your thumb? Yeah.
Hey, and any kind of listeners out there that you guys are into kayak hunting, I would love to see some pictures of you guys toting deer back on your kayak and how you do it. Are you lashing it down? I mean, I saw one guy online that strapped a life vest to a deer and he's pulling the deer back.
Okay.
So I mean, there's all kinds of ways of doing this. I even thought about like an inner tube, hooking an inner tube up to my kayak, throw the deer in the inner tube, and pulling it back. So that's another idea.
You don't live in Florida with gators.
No, dude, I would not be kayak hunting if I lived in Florida.
I know what you should do. What you do is you just kind of put the front legs over your shoulders and kind of make a backpack out of it. The hind end can just sit on the back of the Dude, it'd be like you're giving a piggyback ride on the way back, you know?
And having his like his front legs over my shoulders.
Yes, yeah, just tie them together so it's like a backpack. Yeah.
Man, now that would be cool. Like an idiot going across the river.
All right, man. Let's get to this episode. So we got Tim Knight, and we're gonna be talking about the rut, which hopefully is timely for you. Hopefully it's getting to be the rut in your neck of the woods. I think you and I are both ahead of the rut. I'm still trying to figure out when that's going to be on my new hunting area, but I think it's towards the end of this month, and I'm definitely trying to pay attention to sign and cameras and all that stuff to figure out when it is. But Tim's going to give us some good tips on how to hunt the rut and how he's been real successful with some mature bucks.
Let's get him on the line.
All right. We've got Tim Knight on the line with us, and Adam and I have been searching for some guys that could help us out talking about the rut. And I found some of Tim's articles on Georgia Outdoor News and thought they were really interesting and helpful. So we wanted to get him on the line. Tim has been hunting with a bow since 1979. And like I said, he writes for Georgia Outdoor News. He's been a taxidermist for a real long time. I think he said 35 years, but it could be longer than that. Tim, can you kind of just give us a little background of your hunting and also welcome to the podcast?
Oh, I appreciate y'all having me on. And, I can give you a little history. I was introduced to bow hunting by my shop teacher at Bleckley County High School in Cochran, Georgia, my senior year in 1979. And I remember I started out with a Bear Whitetail 2 Easton Game Getter 2018 aluminum arrows with 5-inch feathers and Bear razor heads with bleeder blades, and shooting with fingers. And that's where I got my, and of course back then, that Bear Whitetail 2, that was a state of the art. After that, I bow hunted like everybody else during bow season. Picked up the rifle during rifle season. Put the bow down, but in 1985 I decided to go strictly bow. And so that's what I did. And so I've been a full-time bow hunter for pretty much all big game, deer, hogs, and turkey, everywhere. I went full-time for turkeys with the bow in 88. But we'll cover that, in a later podcast when we talk about turkey hunting. We're going to talk about deer hunting this time.
That sounds good.
Y'all shoot me some questions. I'll be glad to answer them, or else I'll just kind of give you my spiel.
Well, tell me this. So Adam and I are kind of opposite sides of the fence on this one. What brought you to hunting with the bow full time as opposed to, taking part in the rifle season and some of the other stuff?
Well, I like the challenge, and realistically, if you think about it, the odds of killing a Boone and Crockett buck with a rifle, just like in the Southeast, you're better off to stand out in the field and wait to get struck by lightning, or try to win Mega Millions. The opportunity to kill a whitetail buck that will score Pope and Young minimum with archery equipment is much more a feasible goal to try to approach. Plus, if you have the intestinal fortitude to carry your bow during the rut while everybody else is gun hunting, and it's really paid off dividends for me. So I've been fortunate enough to take quite a few Pope and Young animals in the state of Georgia, along with a lot of good high scoring bucks, some that gross it and some won't net it. And like I told you before, nets are for fish. But it's just, I like the challenge of hunting with a bow. That's just my thing. And shoot a lot of hogs too. That's something we can talk about here in a little bit too. But people ask me all the time, they say, why do you go to the trouble to bait and shoot hogs in the off season? And they don't understand that, while some guys are out shooting 3D tournaments, I'm out shooting 3D live animals. That's not a stagnant target. And a hog is a very challenging, target too. Plus it keeps you in bow hunting shape, to get you ready for deer season. So you're shooting live animals. Big difference in shooting that and a foam target in the yard.
Yep. And you were sharing with us earlier, you have had a lot of success. How many Pope and Young gross deer do you think you would have shot in Georgia? Not necessarily in the book, because like you said, we agree with you.
Gross?
Nets are for fish. Yeah. What do you think you're at gross?
Gross, I've probably got over 15. Official net, you're going to go by the books, the ones that officially make the book. If this last one makes the book, it'll be number 11.
So one of the main things we wanted to talk to you about was the rut, and we're getting close to it in a lot of the southern area. How many of those deer would you consider as part of either the pre-rut, right before the rut, or during the rut? What
just about
what
every one of them. Just about every one of them. I have a window from like October the 20th to November the 10th that I have killed all these animals, and I've killed the majority of them by rattling them up. And here's a great thing that I hope the viewers will consider this. Okay, let me ask you a question. Do you turkey hunt?
I do.
I'm just getting
Okay.
into it. Adam is
I'm a turkey
hardcore.
hunter.
I ask you this. If you had the same mentality as the average deer hunter, if during turkey season, if you walked into the woods with your shotgun and you just sat down beside a tree in your camouflage and waited and hoped that a mature gobbler would walk by you, you didn't carry a call with you, how many gobblers do you think you would kill in a season?
That might not be fair because I hunt field birds. So I feel like I'd probably kill more some years if I would keep my calls in my pocket. But
Okay. All
probably
right.
about
Well,
the same. I like to call turkeys. I love calling turkeys.
Let's take the woods hunters. Okay, let's just say you're a swamp hunter. Ain't no fields around. You go without a call. How many gobblers do you think that you would have close enough if you were just sitting there playing Russian roulette like a deer hunter does? And you consider this now. A deer hunter goes and gets in a stand and hopes and prays that a big buck, if he gets up before dark, will just happen to walk by where he's sitting where he can kill him.
I wouldn't kill many turkeys that way. I wouldn't.
Absolutely you wouldn't. But now, if you're calling or giving that buck or a turkey a reason to come to you, that's the niche. That's what I told you. The turkey hunting in the springtime with a gobbler decoy taught me how to kill big bucks in the pre-rut in the fall. Because what you're doing is you're challenging that animal in his own domain. And a mature buck nor a mature turkey gobbler will not tolerate competition in his area. You know, a lot of people don't even realize this, but I was the one that got this whole thing started about hunting with a gobbler decoy in the spring. And that's a whole nother story, because people kept asking me, man, how are you killing turkeys with a bow and we can't kill them with a gun? I said, because I use a gobbler decoy. That's the only thing I use. And I said, it's deadly. I said, if a mature gobbler or a group of gobblers, even a group of jakes, they see a strange gobbler, they're fixing to come over there and do one or two things: get whooped or whoop him and run him off.
That sounds like we got something to talk about in the spring for sure.
Definitely. And you're kind of going against
absolutely.
the grain with the calling in the South, because you talk to most Southern hunters, and most would say that, you know, calling does not work in the South. That if you go out Midwest where the deer are not as pressured as they are, you know, in the South, it's easier.
Deer calling will work anywhere, anytime, at the right time of year. Doesn't matter what the buck-doe ratio is. If you make a mature buck think that there's a younger buck or another buck in his territory, he will get up and come investigate it.
Okay, let's.
And it's like turkey hunting. You're not going to call one up every time you go, but if you just go sit in a stand, there might be a buck out there laying 100 yards from you that you'll never see, because when he gets up, he's going in another direction. But if you're sitting there tickling antlers and grunting and doing a snort wheeze, he's worrying now. He's like, who is in my territory? He'll get up and come investigate it, and we'll give you a shot. Now, you're not going to get a shot opportunity at every single one of them. Some of them are going to pick you off. They're going to get downwind of you. But that's got a whole lot to do with how you set up. And see, like when I came up with this thing where just by trial and error, I used to be like everybody else. I used to rattle from in the tree. Well, if you have a buck come up and hangs up 50 or 60 yards from you, okay, you can't rattle at him again. You can't grunt to him. He'd look right up in the tree at you. So I developed a system where you let your antlers down on the ground. The antlers are tied about 24 inches apart with a loop in the middle of the cord, and you can use your pull-up rope like a yo-yo, and you can actually rattle on the ground, and you can make foot stomping, rustling noises in the leaves, which keeps the bucks focused on the ground down there where the fight should be. Deer don't fight in trees, you know what I'm saying? And that really turned everything around for me, and I call it, the radical rattling routine. I've written several articles about that, but it's deadly. It really is deadly doing that.
Now that is interesting.
Let's set the stage from the start, and I want to go through your whole setup. as to how you're setting things up to call. So to start off with, can you just tell us what region of Georgia or what area, what type of land you're hunting, and also public, private, all that stuff. Just give us an idea of the terrain.
Yeah, vegetation as well, for sure.
Yeah, I get those questions all the time. I can hunt pretty much anything terrain-wise from the thickest, ugliest swamps you can imagine. We've got some of that. We've got beautiful rolling hardwoods in some areas and other woods, and then we have other places to where it's thick planted pines with little finger branches left in it where they cut the timber and weren't allowed to cut all the way to the water zones because of the zoning, the water laws. So it really doesn't matter. And see, a lot of people don't understand this. I do not, and let me repeat this, I do not run trail cameras. I do not own a trail camera, not one. Okay? I believe in woodsmanship. I believe in getting out there and doing the footwork, learning the terrain. I'm not a big food source hunter. I like to know where my food sources are, but what I like to do is I like to look at the terrain, and I like to learn where the major bedding areas are, and then from those major bedding areas, I like to learn the travel corridors those bucks are going to be using during the pre-rut and the rut when they're on their feet looking for does. Because 99% of the time, if you're hunting a food source, a buck is not going to come to it until after shooting light. Corn pile, he'll be in there at 3 o'clock in the morning. And listen, but here's a great point. We got a lot of stuff to cover, but let me ask you a question. Let's say you run a trail camera. You've got a picture of a monster buck at 3 o'clock in the morning. Now, do you think that buck is waiting till 2:45 in the morning and he's standing up and walking to your corn pile? Or do you think he's like most bucks, 30 minutes to an hour after dark, he's on his feet and he's traveling? And it takes him till 3 o'clock in the morning running his gauntlet to get where you've got your bait. And you go get in your stand the next morning at daylight, and he is just as far away from that corn as he was before it got dark, because he's left that corn pile running his gauntlet, and he's left that pile of corn and traveled. He might be 2 miles from you time you get in your stand.
Yep.
So what do you think it is? Do you think he gets up at dark and moves, or you think he waits till 2:30 and just walks over to the corn pile?
Yeah, I happen to think most bucks are getting up a little bit before dark in most cases, but they're not moving very far while it's light out. And I agree with exactly what you're saying. They're going a long ways to get to that corn pile, or he's got 3-4 different. Maybe it's not far distance, but he's spending a lot of time somewhere else before he gets there.
Here's another scenario that hunters go through. They have beautiful bucks, big bucks on their cameras in July, August, and the 1st of September. They shed their velvet, and then they're in a panic. I've not had a picture of my big deer in 2 weeks. Okay. When they shed that velvet, they turn into a totally different animal. Number one reason is the food sources are swapping over. Farmers are harvesting peanuts and corn and soybeans. Those fields are no longer available as a food source. Whereas the acorns in the woods are starting to drop, and that's drawing the does and the yearlings, and that's where the bucks are going. Where the next. That's why if you go to the most beautiful white oak head you want to go to, or an acorn flat or whatever in July, you won't find a deer track in it, because there's no reason for the deer to be there. But you flip that over to late October, 1st of November, and you got white oaks dropping and all that. All of a sudden, like magic, deer signs start showing up. And you've got big bucks that have their rut zones. They'll leave their summer living area and go to where they like to rut. They'll put their sign down around those food sources that they've been acclimated to since they were born, because they change. Everything changes. That's why I'm not a big fan of trail cameras, because during the rut, you can kill a big buck. You may get one picture of a big buck one morning, and that's the only time he's going to come through there. And if you're not sitting there, you'll never see him.
So what is your, do you hunt in you talked about the terrain a little bit. Is that a lease, or you have some private ground, or?
All my hunting land is, I'm in lease clubs with competition with gun hunters. I have no private land, no place I got right by myself. you know, I pay least money to hunt in competition with gun hunters. But now, the attitude of the average gun hunter is to sit in a spot I can see as far as I can. Okay, and that big mature buck that's living in that swamp thicket that's 500 to 600 yards from where he's sitting, he'll never see him. Never see him unless you get lucky and he gets on a hot doe and runs out into a plot, a food plot, or a field on that hot doe. I mean, he, you know, if he gets on a hot doe, he's like a grown man. He gets stupid, you know. But
So,
other than that, you got to go in there after him.
and with that said, you'd say these tactics that we're going to talk about today would work just as well for a gun hunter if they were willing to follow the same tactics, whether you got a bow in your hand or a gun. You know, you need to get in tight.
Yeah, and I'll tell you this, and I don't mean this to be an arrogant or egotistical statement, but it would not be fair for me to hunt with a gun right now. The stuff I've learned during while I'm bow hunting, or all these years, it would not be fair for me to hunt with a gun. Because, you know, just like right now, you know, like the other day when I shot that deer or with my bow, although I had to wait for him to give me the opportunity to shoot, if I had been a gun hunter, he would have been dead 5 seconds after I put my eyes on him. Because I could have killed him with the gun. I saw him, could have put the crosshairs on him and pulled the trigger, and it'd been over with. You know?
Yep, and I do want to get that story before we finish up. So let's start. Let's start with your scouting, because basically what I want to do is I want to work up to what your tactics are on the stand. So now we've covered the terrain. Let's go to your scouting. So how are you picking a spot on this terrain that you're at?
Every hunter worth his salt should know his food sources as far as pin oaks, water oaks, swamp chestnut oaks, white oaks, laurel oaks, browse, honeysuckle, persimmons. You know, the average guy has got no clue what a persimmon tree is in the swamp. He knows what they look like on the field edge, you know, that grow around these fields. But you take him into the swamp, and he couldn't tell you a persimmon tree from a cypress, because, you know, a lot of people just don't educate themselves to their mass trees. Now, you need to find out where the food is so you know where the does and the yearlings are going to be going, okay? And then you kind of got to play it backwards, just like these new apps on your phones. You know, you can actually pull the property up and look at a topo map live from your phone while you're standing at the property, okay? And you can navigate from your phone as far as looking at your phone and seeing where you're standing and which way you need to walk. But once you find your food sources, then I like to backtrack, and I say, now, where are these bucks? Where's the best place for them to bed? Where is the nastiest, jungliest spot, whether it's planted pines, you know, with volunteer growth in it, or whether it's a beaver pond, or just, and that just comes from a little bit of experience, just knowing where your bucks feel safe in the daytime to bed up. And that's several important things. Now, I hunt 100% of the time out of a climber. People ask me why. Okay, here, let's just say, here's the mistake that 90% of hunters make. Let's just say you go scouting tomorrow and you go find a spot that's just torn up with sign. It's got paw marks, it's got rubs, and the first thing you think is, oh, I've got to get out of here and go get me a stand and put it up in here. Okay, now, unless it's 30 degrees with about a 20-mile-an-hour wind, when you come back in there with your stand, and most people are going to take a buddy back with them to put it up, whether it's a ladder or a lock-on with sticks and steps or whatever, you're going to break a sweat. You're going to leave some scent, okay, when you carry that stand in there to put it up. And then you're going to get up in the stand and tell your buddy or tell yourself, well, I need to cut this, I need to cut that, I need to cut that. It's in my way. Now, you're going to climb down out of that stand. You're going to go over there and cut that stuff. Then you're going to leave out of there, and then you're going to say to yourself, I'll come back here in a couple of days and kill that deer. No, you won't. Because he's going to come in there that night or the night after at 2 o'clock in the morning. He's going to know you've been there, and he's going to leave. The beauty of that climber is if I slip in there and find sign like that, I'm going up that tree right then. I'm hunting right then. I'm not what you would call jeopardizing the perimeter of my stand or my area by disturbing it. It's the element of surprise.
Yeah, Adam, I'm noticing a
Thanks, Steve.
theme between all these guys we're talking to lately. It seems like they might have different opinions on some different tactics and that kind of stuff, but it seems like all these guys are out there killing these big bucks are first sit kind of guys. You get in there and you hunt them the first time, and that's when you kill them.
is your best chance. Now, here's another thing you got to consider. When you put up a permanent stand, whether it's a ladder or a lock-on, it handicaps you to certain winds. It might be a perfect day to hunt in the peak of the rut. Everything is perfect, but where you got your stand, the wind is wrong. And you tell yourself, I can't hunt that stand today because the wind is wrong. You won't have that problem with a climber because you can play the wind with a climber, even if you have to go to the trouble of coming in from a totally different direction or moving over to the other side of the trail that you're hunting, if that's what you're hunting, or buck sign. You got to get on the downwind side of it. You got to feed his nose. You can fool his eyes, you can fool his ears, you ain't gonna fool that nose, not on a mature deer. Ain't gonna happen.
So while we're on the topic, how about you give us your thoughts on scent control? What do you take any precautions for scent control? What are your thoughts there?
I'm not a big scent control guy, and here's the reason. And I've learned this from hunting wild hogs. Who has got the best nose in the woods, period, bar none. A mature boar hog can smell an acre and 10 inches in the ground, rooted up immediate. So that kind of tells you how good they can smell, okay? The best thing you can do for deer hunting is to play the wind. I'm not saying go pump a bunch of gas and get gas on your boots and go to the woods, play the wind. No. I mean, you got to use a little common sense. But play in the wind, because the average guy never thinks about his watch band. He never thinks about his hat. He'll do his clothes. He'll do everything else. But he doesn't think about his watch band or his hat, or his belt. That's 3 of the biggest stink bombs that a hunter's got, is his watch band, his hat, and his belt. How many times have you put your belt in the washing machine?
Zero
here.
Hat?
Yeah.
Hat?
Yeah, I do wash my hat, but more for personal reasons, not for the deer.
Well, I'll tell you what you do sometime when after you've worn, I'm not saying take a brand new watch, but after you've worn a watch for a little while, take it off your wrist and smell the backside of it.
Yeah.
It definitely has some stink to it. It
yeah,
can.
That's what I'm saying.
Especially if you get sweaty.
And hunters, they never ever consider that. They don't think that's a scent post, but by God, it is. I mean, and I'm not talking up to a 3.5-year-old. Once a buck gets 3.5 years old, he's primarily going to be nocturnal, whether he's pressured or not, because that's just a survival instinct them animals have. When you get 4.5, 5.5, and 6.5 and older, you are dealing with one smart cookie. Okay, just like using ATVs and 4-wheelers to get where you're going. I mean, do you know how far away you have to park a 4-wheeler for a deer not to hear it? It's a
long way. Yeah.
The average guy that hunts in the swamp, let's just say he has to drop off a hill and come down in the swamp to hunt. He's usually wasting his time trying to hunt those deer in the morning because he can't get behind them.
Yeah.
I've learned that on a couple of clubs that I'm in. They're big swamp clubs, got quite a few members. But I'd rather slip in there in the afternoon and get in there close to where the deer are bedding and wait for them to get up and come out, because you can't get behind them in the morning. They crank them ATVs up and ride down through that swamp. And even if you're on the bank of the river and those guys start 2 miles away, you can hear them coming the whole time. And deer know that. Mature deer, they ain't stupid.
Yeah. Okay, so we use some apps out in the field, and by the way, do you have a particular app that you prefer to use?
I like the Hunt Stand app. That seems to be a real good one.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
That's the one I use most of the time. Yeah.
Do you have any clubs that use that as a group as well? I know you can set that up.
Not that I know of, because I'm pretty much a loner when I hunt.
You don't want to point to everybody where you're going to be sitting, huh?
No, because I've had some bad experiences about that. It's you hunt in clubs, and that's what's always been fun to me. If you kill a big deer, it always seems like people start following you around like the Pied Piper. And I try to tell them, I said, there ain't no sense in hunting that deer anymore. He's dead. But it's funny. Yeah.
So how do you hunt around the
fun.
pressure? I mean, if you've got a bunch of different individuals in the same lease, how do you know where they're at, or how are you kind of gauging where you're going to go based off of where you think they'll be?
Well, like I say, because 99% of them are going to hunt out of a fixed stand, whatever's convenient, whatever they can drive their four-wheeler 100 or 150 yards from and get off and walk to their stand.
So do you have those pre-marked, or just kind of know where they're all at and try to
pretty much know where they're at? If you do your homework and do your scouting, if you know that property like the back of your hand, then you'll find their stands, and then you can make sure you get away from them. And you can actually use that to your advantage. You can let them put pressure that moves deer in areas they're not willing to go into with a climber on their back.
Okay, so I want to hit on some things we talked about with scouting. I think I might be one of those guys that can't find that persimmon tree in the swamp, because I know what a persimmon tree looks like. I've found plenty of smaller ones, and it could be the properties I'm sitting on. But I have the hardest time finding.
It's the blackest tree in the woods. It's as black as mud. Yeah.
And I know you can recognize the leaves with the spots on them, but I have yet to find a persimmon tree that's bearing fruit. Can you give me some ideas of when to look and what to look for as finding those trees? I imagine there's got to be some dropping fruit if the trees are there. I mean, the seeds are coming from somewhere.
But you have to start before they drop. You have to start in mid to late August. Get you a very good quality pair of binoculars and go check those trees to see if they have fruit on them. Because up in that canopy, without a good pair of binoculars, those green persimmons blend in with the leaves. There's no way you can see them with your naked eye.
Okay.
So you do that. You do the same thing with your oak trees, and you just make notes either on paper or in your head which trees have mass, so you know which ones to go hunt when it's time for them to drop.
With the persimmon tree, is there a certain size that typically they'll start dropping fruit? Like you'll just ignore it if it's not,
when I talk
a certain
about
diameter?
Trees, I'm talking about big trees that have like a 60-foot canopy. I'm talking about these are big trees, but the top of the canopy will be loaded with fruit. And you have male persimmon trees and you have female persimmon trees. The males don't produce; the females do.
And the only way to tell is scouting, right?
Got to scout. Yep.
Okay, so, and I know as well you use Google Earth. Can you give us an idea of, let's say you're on a brand new lease.
Right.
And you're going to start scouting online in March, or maybe you're turkey hunting in March, let's say in May. How do we start looking at that property?
All right, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the overall terrain. Okay, I'm going to see how much of it is pine, how much of it is hardwood, how much of it is clear cut, how much of it is select cut. Then I'm going to look and see what water sources do we have. Is there a major creek? Is there a river? Are there minor creeks on it? I'm going to look at that. And then I'm going to look for bottlenecks and pinch points. Do we have a place where a little finger of hardwoods is going up into a big head of planted pines? It's a jungle. And the only way to access it is to walk that little branch that was left. Or just to say it borders up to a river or a large creek. I'm going to walk the creek bank, see if I can find major crossings, where the deer are crossing. That would be how I would start,
Okay. And from that point, maybe you find those different areas, and then you're going to start putting boots on the ground?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm going to put boots on the ground. And, if depending on what, if it's springtime, like you're saying, I'm going to look for old rubs, old paw marks that are filled in, where, just general areas that bucks like to travel. And then I'm going to try to figure out where this guy's bedding at,
Now, when it comes to bedding, do you think a mature buck will typically bed in the same area on the same wind, or you think they kind of hop around?
I think he's got a home range that he beds at different times of the year. It just, in the springtime, he's got an area he'll bed close to his food source, because in the spring and the summer, all he's worried about is his stomach. And then you let it turn around to the other end of the season when it gets to fall, all he's worried about is the girls. He ain't so much worried about his stomach as he is in women folk. Yep.
All right. Adam, I want to let you jump in here. You can kind of see where I'm going with this, but I don't want to jump ahead of where you're at if you got any questions.
Well, I want to circle back to the identification of different trees, and you're talking about persimmon trees, different types of oaks. I know you didn't just start out hunting and know exactly what every tree was. Was there a certain type of process of educating yourself on the different food sources available?
Yeah, that's the key. You educate yourself. If you don't know what a certain tree bark or a certain leaf pattern, then look it up. Go study it and look it up so you'll know. I was fortunate when I was in high school. I had a forestry class that was taught by Mr. Bubba Polk at Bleckley County High School in Georgia. And part of that course, we had to learn all our trees. And that was a major step as far as, we had to learn everything from a sweet gum to a black gum to a cypress, to a hackberry tree, to an ironwood. Just everything.
There's a couple links actually on Georgia Outdoor News that I've seen that provide a lot of good information on natural trees and browse. Tim, I don't even know, you might have been I don't know if you comment on there a whole lot, but you might have been a part of those threads, but I'll try to put a link to those in the show notes as well.
Yeah, Bass Pro, a lot of times will have these little booklets, especially like the Bass Pro here in Nashville. You can go there and it's tree identification for the state of Tennessee. So I'm sure most states that would hold a Bass Pro or a Cabela's would have some sort of publication like that.
Now, this is more of a woody shrub than it is a tree, but do you know what an American beautyberry is, Bush?
I have no clue.
Do you know what?
Yes, that's the purple berries, right?
Right. But there's two purple berries out there, and deer like both of them, but they don't eat the berries. Okay. You have American beautyberry, and then you have pokeberry.
Yeah.
You remember the old song "Poke Salad Annie"?
You
Deer absolutely love the leaves on a pokeberry bush. They won't eat the berries, but they'll eat the leaves. Same way with American beautyberry. Most of your new clear cuts, especially in the middle Georgia area and in the southeast, if they do a big clear cut, that's one of the prominent woody shrubs that's going to come up in that clear cut is going to be pokeberry. And deer absolutely love it. They will eat the leaves off them pokeberries like it's soybeans. But if you don't know what you're looking for, it's a moot point.
Yeah. And now, is that a year-round food source then, since it's the leaves?
No, it's frost. First frost will kill it back. But it's
okay.
It's late spring all the way through the summer. That's both. And the American beautyberry is more of a hardy plant than the pokeberry. It'll hang around a little longer. But there again, as a general rule, unless that's all that's available to the deer, if there's an acorn dropping close by, they're going to leave, the browse and go to the acorns.
Do you find that certain oak trees are usually more productive on an annual basis, or maybe even attract the deer, even if there's other acorn trees dropping?
I find that water oaks are pretty much in every, most water oaks, if they get the proper amount of water, they'll make every year. 10 oaks maybe every 2 years, sometimes 3. White oaks and swamp chestnut oaks, usually every other year for them. You very seldom find a bumper crop of white oaks. Now, if you have a good many trees, then you'll have different trees make different years. So you might have some white oaks every single year, but just not with the same trees.
Okay. And what order would you put those in as far as deer preference?
White oak's number 1.
Mm-hmm.
Swamp chestnut oak, which is usually the last acorn to fall, it's a member of the white oak family, but it makes a much bigger acorn. They'll make acorns. A white oak is generally going to be about the size of the last section of your pinky finger, and a swamp chestnut oak is going to be about as big as or bigger than the first joint in your thumb.
Okay. When do those typically drop in your area? The swamp chestnut.
The swamp chestnut oaks are going to be mid-November here.
Okay. So you got you basically can hunt oaks from the beginning season all the way till mid to end of November.
Your water oaks and your pin oaks, if they make, they're going to be the very first ones to drop.
Okay. Going back to your climber stand that you use, with how long you've been hunted, I imagine you've tried a few different ones. What kind of stand do you like the most, and what do you look for in a climber?
I use a lone wolf.
Okay.
I like a lone wolf because it's very stealthy, it's very quiet, It doesn't have a lot of metal parts that can clank and clang. You know, and as long as it's not a pine tree, even if it's a hickory nut tree, you could be 50 yards from me and you'll never hear me go up that tree. That's the whole thing about you. You got to be stealthy. You know, you got to get in there quiet and get up the tree quiet.
And I know that lone wolf is, you know, they pack up real tight too, so you can haul it a long ways.
They do. Yeah. And I've got mine altered, just some stuff I've learned over the years. I use an aftermarket seat, which is like an old man. It's called a silent seat. And it's a net seat that goes in the climber. Sits really good if you're going to sit there all day. And I've actually, you know, you can, and I know it's hard to explain this without you seeing it, but I keep a ratchet cutter and a limb saw in a pouch that's attached to my climber. So if I get to a tree I've never climbed before and I need to trim it a little bit as I go up, I've got those tools handy as well. On the bottom of the stand, on the bottom of the platform, it serves two purposes, but I've got about a 1/4 inch thick camouflage cover foam padding on the bottom side of my platform. Here's the reason. It gives you a little padding when you're carrying it on your back. But the most important thing is when you're up in that stand and you have deer close to you and you're having to shift around, move your feet or move your weight, if your boots are full of mud or whatever, those little those little dirt grungies are not raining down there around the deer and giving your position away. Anything that's dropping off your boots is catching on that pad under your platform, and they're not falling to the ground and alerting the deer to your position.
That sounds like one of those little attention to detail things that come up with a lot of hours in the stand right there.
That's called trial and error.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so
you learn from experience.
So you've done your online scouting, you did your on foot scouting. Now let's say it's coming up on the rut. Are you scouting during the season for hot sign, or are you just hitting spots that you know from the preseason scouting?
Most of the time I'm what I call I'm a kamikaze guy. I'm going into areas that I know either from the previous year or from the sign that I found that there's a good buck in that area, and I go in there after him.
Okay. All right. So now you've gone into that spot. You know you've got your climber on your back. How are you setting up in that area?
Okay. What I'm doing is like with my climber. I try to put my back it doesn't work all the time, but I try to put my back to where I think the deer are coming from. That way I can use the tree as camouflage. And another thing that does, it almost forces me to make the deer get broadside or slightly past me before I can shoot him, because I really don't want to take a 1/4 2 shot unless I have to. Okay. Because when I stand up, I can literally just get right up against the trunk of that tree and play peekaboo, with an approaching deer, and I'm not silhouetted out on the front of a tree where you can get picked off much easier.
Okay, good. All right. So now we've worked all the way from scouting up to now we're up in the stand. Now, can you kind of walk us through when you get up in that stand and you're all settled in, maybe walk us through morning or evening or how you're setting up as far as your rattling and your calling sequences.
Question. Yeah, let's go through this. Okay, this is me. Okay, I'm self-employed. And you can say, what's that got to do with anything? It's got everything to do with it. Okay, if I go hunting in the mornings, okay, you could literally see a deer from any time from the crack of daylight till noon, realistically, on days you have to work. Okay. So all I can do is look at my watch and think about what I got to do that day. I can't enjoy my hunt. Is somebody at my shop at the door waiting on me to come back so they can check something and blah, 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 blah. Versus if I get my work done and go hunting in the afternoon, okay, I don't have to worry about work till the next day. Now, let's cover this little thing right quick. Let's just say you're an average Joe, okay? Instead of taking days off of work, ask your boss if he will let you take your time off in hours, okay? And what I mean by that is if you take an 8-hour day, if you take 2 hours for 4 days, you take off 2 hours early for 4 days, you've burnt 1 day of work, but you get 4 hunts. See where I'm going with that?
Sounds pretty good to
I
me.
like that.
But you see the math. You tell your boss, say, look, I want to take a day off, but I just want to take it 2 hours at a time for 4 days, and you don't burn but 1 day. You know.
Yeah.
If you take a full day off, you get 1 morning hunt and 1 afternoon hunt, and you got to go back to work. Okay. You see, you do the math there. Okay.
Yeah.
I prefer to hunt in the afternoons for the very reason is basically the last 2 hours are good. The last hour is even better. That last 30 minutes is prime time because you know if you're going to see a deer, you're going to see him in those next 30 minutes. And you're just wired. Every little sound, every little noise you hear, the woods are much more noisy in the afternoons because the sun's been up all day. It's dried everything out. The woods aren't damp like they are in the morning. You know, the deer can just sneak right up in your back pocket in the morning. You never know he was there. Plus, like I said, if you sit there till 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock in the morning, you get bored. You start looking at your phone. You start fidgeting. You start doing this and that. And then you wind up getting busted. Deer sneaks up on you. You don't know he's there, you know. It's just a combination of those things. But in the afternoon, if I have not seen anything or any movement, when that sun sets and everything gets shaded over, there's not a ray of sunshine anywhere. I'm fixing to let those antlers down on the ground with that pull-up cord, and I'm fixing to do a small, short, rattling segment. And when I say that, I'm not trying to sound like two big bucks having a knockdown, drag-out fight to the death. I'm trying to sound like two young bucks that are in there tickling their antlers, just sparring. I'm wanting, if that buck is out there listening, I want him to think that two small bucks are in his territory and I'm invading it. And most of the time, if he's worth his salt, he's going to get up and come investigate. I love to do a snort wheeze. That's one of the most underrated calls that there is out there. And, you know, and it's real easy to learn to do it with your natural voice because that snort wheeze is a mature buck telling another buck, this is my area, get out.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just basically trying to basically say the letter F through your lips and just go. And that carries through the woods like sneezing in church. You know, if it's good quiet, I mean, buck can hear that 100 yards, you know. And then I may follow that up with a couple of tendon grunts. And then you may ask, well, how often do you rattle? Okay, well, if you start from sunset until it's too dark, you can see up under the tree. That usually gives you enough time to do about 3 rattling segments, about anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes apart. And that's what I do. I usually give it about 10 or 15 minutes. If I hadn't heard anything or seen anything, I'll do it again. Let me run something by you right quick, just as an analogy. Okay.
Okay.
Let's say you're a traveling salesman. Okay. We as people, you know, let's say you've been gone on the road for a year, because most animals, they reproduce, you know, once a year. Turkeys in the spring, deer in the fall. Okay. You've been away from home for a year. You'd start getting close to home. You pull up in your driveway and there's 5 or 6 little cars in the yard. Well, you're saying to yourself, well, that's good. Mama's having a Tupperware party. She's doing something to pass the time till I get home. But now you turn that around and you pull up in the yard and you see a big old jacked up 4-wheel drive truck in your yard, and you see the silhouette of a strange man in your house. Lawyers call that temporary insanity.
We got problems.
Yeah, are you following me? Well, deer and turkeys are the same way. Turkeys and deer are the same entity, just different times of the year. In the springtime, deer and summer, deer are in their bachelor groups. They're all buddy-buddy. We can hang out together. We can eat together, sleep together, whatever. turkeys in the fall are like that. You'll have hens with poults or young turkeys. Then you'll have groups of jakes, and you'll have groups of mature gobblers, all hanging out together, all having a good time, all buddy-buddy, all roosting together. But swap the seasons. During the spring, them gobbler groups are going to bust up. I ain't your friend no more. I'm going over here to strut. You stay your butt over here. If you come over there, there's going to be trouble. Same way with deer. In the fall, I'm going to go over here and rub these trees. I'm going to put me some paw marks over here. You stay on that side of the property and do your rubs and paw marks, and we're going to be good. Other than that, it's going to be a problem. You see where I'm going with that?
Yep. I see what you're talking about.
Yep. And that's what you're doing, whether you're using a gobbler decoy in the spring or you're using the rattling and grunting in the fall. You're basically challenging that animal or turkey's dominance in his own area. And if he's worth his salt, he is going to defend his territory. He's not going to tolerate it.
So once you make
no more than you tolerate a strange man in your house.
Yeah. Not at all.
Yep. Not at all.
Once you make your calling sequence, what can you expect from there?
Okay. What I do is I hunt with my ears as much as I do my eyes. Okay. But then again, there's going to be conditions. It might be a little breezy or whatever, where the hearing conditions aren't good, and I'll use my eyes. But there again, if I just went and sat in the stand like a gun hunter had a mentality of doing, and you're just hoping and praying that a deer gets up and walks by you, it's not going to happen very often. Give the animal a reason to come to you. It's just like turkey hunting. You're not going to strike a gobbler every time you make a call. But when it works.
All right. So can you walk us through this whole scenario? This most recent buck you killed, I just saw on Facebook you killed a buck you call the oxbow buck. Is that a buck that you were able to call in with these same tactics?
Yeah, and I had been rattling and grunting and snort wheezing periodically that morning. That was one of them deals to where I told my son, I said, I'm going to hunt till 11 o'clock, which this time of the year, it's not that late. I know y'all are an hour behind me, right? And y'all are in Alabama?
I'm in Florida, and Adam's in Tennessee. So I'm on Eastern. He's in Central.
So one's on Eastern, and who's on Central?
I am. Tennessee.
Okay. All right. So anyway, well, the point I'm making here is right now, 10 o'clock in the morning is only going to be 9 o'clock in a few weeks, because when the time changes back. And ordinarily, a few years ago, the time had already changed back. It used to change around the mid-October, but they've moved it up now. So, but anyway, the effort to get to Oxbow, which I named that deer that because he was living on an island behind an oxbow lake on the river. All right. I've hunted that deer that was, for a couple of years. Last year, year before, I never put my eyes on him. Last year, we had that terrible drought. So the oxbow lake was completely dry. So the animals could cross it anywhere. But this year, it filled back up with water. So what it did was it created a true bottleneck between the back of the oxbow lake and the high bluff. Do you understand what I'm talking about? On the high bluff of a river, anytime you travel down the river, one side of it's going to have a high bluff, the other side is going to be a flat. And the river will change from side to side as you go down it. It may change to one side, and it's just the nature of how the river has cut its path over the years. And an oxbow lake is actually an old run of the river where the river has changed course over years and years and years. But with this oxbow lake being full of water, it created a funnel or a bottleneck, to where there was only about 70 yards between the back of the oxbow lake and the high bluff on the river. That was where that deer, if he came around that oxbow lake or came in from the backside to bed up, he had to walk that high bluff or swim. So that's how, I pinched him down, and as luck would have it, there was a river slough. You got to consider now, the river runs north and south. There was a river slough that ran east and west, and this river slough was also deep. It was probably about 7 feet deep if you got down in the bottom of it. And this river slough allowed me to get down in it and use it to navigate to go to the tree that I climbed to hunt this deer. And that's what I did. That way I don't have to, if you can imagine the deer travel north and south, up and down the river, and they have to cross this slough that I'm walking in. So the only way he could cut my track was to get down in the slough, which they don't do, and walk parallel with it. But the slough had a little bit of water in the bottom, so it was basically my feet were covered up to the ankles all the way to my stand because that slough had a little bit of water in it. So I could walk in and out of there scent free. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
The only wind I had to worry about was the prevailing wind blowing from the river to me, because where I was set up and the trail he was using, and this is what always works out. You know, you can say, well, the deer's going to come from that way. You can almost bet he's going to come from a different direction. Well, to make a longer story short, I got in there about 30 minutes before daylight Friday morning, and by 9 o'clock, I'd seen 3 deer. I'd seen a big doe, a yearling, and about a 100-inch 8-point. I'm facing the trail that's on the bluff, that's on the river, that runs behind the Oxbow Lake. I've got another trail that's behind me that didn't seem to be used as much, but where I'm set up on the side of this bank on this slough, I'm 18 to 20 feet above the trail that I'm actually hunting, expecting the deer to come down. The trail behind me, because of the terrain, I'm only about 8 feet above it, if you can picture that.
Mm-hmm.
It's like being on the side of a ridge. Okay. At 10 minutes to 11, I didn't told myself I was going to get down at 11, which that's only 10 o'clock sun time. Okay. Which ordinarily I would never get down at 10 o'clock, you know, unless I just had to go be somewhere. I'd sit there till noon.
Mm-hmm.
I look and I see legs coming. Well, it was bright sunlight, beautiful morning. About the time I saw legs, I saw the sunlight hit his antlers, and I'm like, oh my God, that's Oxbow. When you see a mature buck like that, there's no, you know, I get that question all the time. Say, how do you know if a buck's big enough to shoot? And I'll tell them, I say, look, if my first impression of a deer is, hey man, that's a pretty nice buck, he ain't big enough to shoot. But if your first impression of a deer is, oh my God, shoot that one. And that was exactly what happens. You know, a 130-inch rack on a 160-pound swamp deer is going to look like a giant. It's going to look like a giant. It's going to look like a 160-inch Midwest deer. He just is, you know.
Yeah.
So he's coming down that trail, walking like a buck does, just a steady walk. He's coming to the Oxbow, to that island. He's coming to bed up. I know what he's doing. All right. Excuse me, I had to drink a little water there. All right. So he's coming down that trail that I'm only 8 feet above him. Okay. So he walks behind a huge poplar tree. I draw back. As soon as his head pops out from behind that tree, he locks up like he's hit a wall. I feel the breeze hit me in the back of the neck, and I'm going, oh man, don't tell me. So I'm standing there at full draw, and he's standing there, and he's checking the wind, and he stands there, and stands there, and stands there to the point I get tired. I'm like, I don't want to shoot him, you know, trembling. I said, I'm gonna have to turn your head or do something. Well, fortunately, he turned his head and looked up the slough and allowed me to let my bow down. I said, okay, I'm good now. I said, one way or another, you're gonna either keep coming, or you're gonna turn around, and I'll get a shot at you trying to lead. Well, he turns around, and as soon as he turns around, I draw back again. But he's not moving. He's just standing there, turned around the other way. So I can see his butt, and I can see his head. That's all I can see. Okay? So he takes 3 or 4 quick steps away from me, which puts him at about 24 yards or 25. I put the pin on his last rib, and I pulled the trigger. And the arrow was flying perfect till right before it got to him. Okay? My arrow hit a small limb, and it kicked my arrow to the right. and my heart sunk because where I hit the deer, I actually made a much better shot than I thought I did. But, you know, as a bow hunter, stuff like that happens. That broadhead, that bipolar broadhead, actually hit him right on the brown-white hairline about halfway up his left ham. It went in, and you could hear it. You could hear it shatter the bone. I mean, it actually broke his back leg in the femur bone, and the broadhead exited right in front of his sternum bone. And just for the sake of, you know, if you want to hear the total truth about it, it was a devastating shot because the way the broadhead traveled and where it came out, it disemboweled the deer.
Oh, man.
And he took all. I didn't know this at the time. I said, I ain't even got out of my tree. So I waited a couple of minutes, and I was just kind of disheartened because I could tell that, you know, but I could tell he was in a world of hurt the way he left there, because I mean he was making all kind of racket, trying to navigate with that leg flopping behind him. And I was just sitting there hoping. I said, well, hopefully I cut the femoral artery in that ham.
Yeah.
Or, so anyway, I got down, went over to where my arrow was. My arrow was just laying on top of the ground. It wasn't hurt. I mean, just had some blood sign on it. There was white hair everywhere, and there was great blood sign everywhere, almost like a blood grenade went off. Well, that made me feel a little better. And I took about 2 more steps, and there was literally, you know, and I'm not saying this to gross anybody out. This is actually the truth. There was a double handful of intestine laying on the ground. And I knew at that point, I said, I don't know how far he's going to go, but he's dead. There's no, I mean, I've killed this deer. There's no doubt about it. I have killed this deer. So you learn from experience. The first thing I did was went in my fanny pack, took out a length of toilet tissue, and I hung it on a bush right there. Got my stuff up and made a big circle and got out of there. And I contacted one of my good buddies who's got a great dog, and I told him what had happened. I said, let's give this deer 6 hours, and we'll go back. I said, I feel sure I've made a killing shot, but let's just give him plenty of time. You know, it's like I tell people, if he's dead now, he'll be dead in an hour. He'll be dead tomorrow. If he's dead, he ain't going another step. He'll be right there tomorrow if he's there right now. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, yeah. So it's better to err on the side of caution. So we did. And we got back over there about 5 o'clock and put the dog on the track. And in less than 15 minutes, we were standing over the deer.
All right.
So, you know, it's just, you know, everybody likes to make a perfect shot. And really the angle I shot him was, the shot wasn't as bad as I thought it was. If I'd have shot 4 inches to the left, it would have gone in his last rib and up towards his shoulder. But as luck would have it, it went in the center of his ham and exited at the bottom of his sternum bone. And, but it you know, the bipolar broadhead it's got a little bit over 5 inches of total cut. So it just creates a devastating wound channel. And you can get away with a marginal hit. And that's what I did. You know, everybody likes to make a perfect shot, but as a bow hunter, just sometimes, you know, things like that happen. But I'm tickled I recovered the deer. That was the main thing. Yeah.
So tell us about this broadhead real quick. This is, you manufacture these, or I know you sell them?
Yeah, well, I don't actually manufacture them, but I do design them. Mr. Stuart Boswell and Boswell Machine Shop. You may have heard of their other company. They make Compton chokes. Charlie Boswell and Stuart Boswell. They make and they're in Sylvania, Georgia.
Okay.
But they make I designed this head, but they make my tips, my pins, and my ferrules. And my blades come out of American Cutting Edge out of Ohio. They're the #1 box blade manufacturer in the world. But to tell you a little history about the bipolar, I was a paid pro staffer for Muzzy Broadheads for years. All right. I was designing this head for them so they would have a broadhead that they could sell in the springtime for turkey hunters. Because other than just a handful of bear hunters, their sales in the springtime were just stagnant, just dead. Nobody used or talked about Muzzy Broadheads in turkey hunting circles. Everybody was shooting these 2 and 2-inch cut expandables, or, you know. So I was building this head to where we could bridge the gap between the guy that loves an expandable and hates a fixed, and the guy that loves a fixed but hates an expandable. It's a hybrid head. It's got a 1 1/8 inch fixed blade cut all the time, and then it also has 2 expandable blades that when they're fully expanded, they're 2 1/8 inches. So you've got 1 1/8 by 2 1/8 inch wound channel cut, with a trocarb tip on it, which if you measure the total cutting surfaces on all of it, it comes up to a little over 5 inches. And as a bow hunter, you get what you cut. And as luck would have it, right about the time I got finished developing this head, I actually made a trip up to the Muzzy plant up in Cartersville, Georgia. They looked at the design. They loved it. We were fixing to go forward with it. It was actually going to be called the Muzzy Nightmare. That was going to be the original, and spelled like my name with a K. And they were going to use it as a turkey hunting broadhead. So while I was at the Muzzy plant, one of the guys asked me, said, "Have you shot any big game animals with it?" I said, "No." I said, "I designed this head to shoot turkeys with." All right. So after we went through the meeting and everything, that kind of stuck in my head. I said, well, what would it hurt? I'll bait up some hogs in the swamp and shoot a hog with it, see what it'll do to a hog. Well, that's what I did. And about a week later, I shot about 150-pound sow in the swamp with this prototype head, and it went through her like a wet sack. She ran 20 yards and turned a flip. And when I walked down there to where I had shot her, the broadhead had gone through her and actually stuck in a cypress knee. And it was like somebody took a cup of blood and just chunked it. And I was like, my goodness, look at the blood sign. And it was like that for the 20 yards from the point of impact to where the hog was laying there. And I picked that thing up and I said, you know what? I think we got something here. So I shared that with them, and we were still going ahead with the project. And yet, lo and behold, and there's some other things that went on that were beyond my control. But about a week later, Faradyne Corporation came in and offered to buy Muzzy out. And Faradyne is the company that owns Rage Broadheads. Okay. So Faradyne bought Muzzy out. So I kind of saw the handwriting on the wall. I said, they might give me a little bit of money for this idea, and then just, because it'd be competition to them, they would probably just toss it,
Yeah.
So I called them and I told them, I said, look, I'm just going to, with all the things that have happened, I'm just going to keep this for myself. And that's what I did. I just turned it around. I changed the name to Bipolar because it's actually the best of both worlds. It's got the toughness of a fixed head, but it's got the hemorrhage capability of a large expandable. And it does have a lot of different personalities to it because of the way you can set it up and shoot it. And, but that's kind of how that went. And that was 4 years ago. So I just brought it home and started doing my own R&D by shooting carcasses in the yard. And I'd hang deer, turkey, and hog carcasses up in the yard, and I would shoot them from every possible angle. And I would actually use a steel drum to shoot through for endurance to see how tough the head was. And all 3 of our models will survive an inline strike with a steel drum with no issues. And if y'all got any questions about them, I'll be glad to answer them.
Yeah, well, where can somebody find these if they're looking to buy them?
All right. We deal mainly over the internet sales. We sell direct to the public, and our website is www.bi-polarbroadheads.com. You got to make sure you put that dash between the I and the P. And they can get on Facebook and just simply type in Bipolar Broadheads on their search engine, and it will take you to our Facebook page.
Okay, and we'll put a link to both of those in the show notes. Adam, do you have any questions about those broadheads?
No, I was just kind of looking at some pictures online, and I was curious about the flight of the broadhead. It just seems like it's a bulky looking, a lot going on with it, and I saw some of the devastation that occurs when you shoot something. I can totally see that, but how about the flight?
Yeah, in its closed state, it's only 1 1/8 by 5/8 of an inch, which makes it smaller than most 3 or 4 blade fixed heads in flight.
That's probably like a Slick Trick Magnum.
That was
something like that.
Yeah, it was that was the first thing I addressed with it when I started building it, was the flight characteristics. Will it fly like a field point? Because it doesn't matter if it cuts an 8-inch hole, it's got to fly to your point of aim. It's got to be tunable. And we've had zero, and I repeat that, we've had zero flight issues with the bipolar. It's been awesome. As long as your bow is tuned to shoot a bullet hole through paper with a fletched or a bare shaft, that broadhead will fly with a field point to 100 yards.
All right. I wanted to go to this oxbow buck again real quick. Is that something that the other guy, was that on a leased property? Were there other guys on the property that knew about that buck?
Yeah. Actually, this property was on a piece of property leased by a commercial hunting operation.
Okay,
Yep.
so I'm sure they had some interest in that buck.
Yeah, I mean they have hunters in there, and you know, you can take hunters and put them out, but a lot of them are just not willing, you know, to go to the extra lengths and the extra trouble, because you're talking about a 30-minute truck ride, you're talking about a 15-minute four-wheeler ride, and then you're talking about a 30-minute walk with a climber on your back to access this spot.
Was this buck actually on the island you were mentioning?
He was coming to it. Well, he was living on it, but that morning he had been out carousing and cruising, and he was coming back to bed up. That was what he was coming to.
How many acres is this
See,
island?
I was on the back side of it. I was on the bedding side of the Oxbow Lake.
How many acres is this island?
It's probably about 12 to 14.
Okay. Is it long and skinny, or is it?
No, sir.
I
It's
got some
like, if
birds.
you're familiar with an Oxbow Lake, it's like a horseshoe.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It would be the inside of a horseshoe, and the outside edge of the horseshoe would be the water.
Okay.
So, and he doesn't have to actually cross water to get onto the island. That's where you're hunting that little pinch point to get onto
That's
the
what
island.
I'm saying. Yeah, that was the whole.
Yep.
That was what made it. Being able to pinch him down or bottleneck him or funnel him is because he was having to come around that water, you know, going to or from. And that's what bottlenecked him by me. The combination of those sloughs in there and that Oxbow Lake, there was just only certain places that he could travel.
So when you left the truck that morning, were you looking for this buck in particular, or you were more hunting a rut funnel period and you knew this buck was around?
Well, yeah, I was. Yeah, you know, when I call him Oxbow, I mean, you're not going to see many big old mature deer like that in a lifetime. You know what I'm saying?
Uh-huh.
The average, you know, if you were to poll all the bow hunters just in our state, 99% of the bow hunters in Georgia don't have a Pope and Young buck.
Yep.
There's just not that many. That's why you don't see these hunting shows do any shows in Georgia or Alabama or Florida or South Carolina or Mississippi much, because they can film all year and never see a Pope and Young buck. But they're running around like flies out there in the Midwest, you know. But it's a totally different animal.
Right. Yep.
You can take some, you know, and I'll throw this out there. You can take some of your big TV hunters, you bring them to the South and turn them loose in these swamps. They won't have near the success. They'll be lucky if they see a Pope and Young animal or a 120 class animal in a year's hunt. They'll be lucky to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a totally different game.
Most especially get it on video and get the kill on video. Yep.
And you said, I know we talked about the score, but you mentioned earlier how mature this deer was. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I pulled his jawbone, and in my opinion, it's the oldest deer that I've ever killed, and in all the years that I've been in the taxidermy business, it's the most worn jaw that I've ever seen, and I've seen a lot of them. Even his lower front teeth, all there was just little chips and pieces of them on one side, and the other side was completely worn down to the jawbone.
And you've got those pictures on Facebook, right? If people just want to look at it, it's Tim Knight on Facebook, right?
people that are listening to this podcast can go to Bipolar Broadheads on there and look that up, or they can go to my personal page, Tim Knight, and look me up, and I'll go ahead and tell them. I know there's a lot of Tim Knights out there on Facebook, but my avatar will be a turkey head with a broadhead laying in the front of it. That'll be my avatar.
Okay.
TIMKNIGHT.
And I've seen pictures of that jawbone. Is that one broken on one side, or is that just the tooth totally worn out? Or?
I've reconstructed it since then, but that jawbone was so worn down where those teeth were missing, it actually popped when I was trying to extract it.
Okay.
So I cleaned it up and epoxied it back together. So when the biologist checks it, but he's probably going to use that other side, because when the jawbone's damaged, and you could tell he had a couple of missing teeth there on that one side.
Yeah.
He'll use that other side, I'm sure, because it's in much better shape to be able to age the animal. Now, I don't know this for a fact, but I was told today that there's a place you can send the jawbone to, and they will actually take a saw with those front teeth I was telling you about, and they'll actually saw the teeth where they can get to the rings inside the tooth, and they can get a lot closer, because most of the biologists will tell you once a deer gets 6.5 years old, it's kind of a crapshoot to tell you exactly how old he is once he gets 6.5, just by tooth wear.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, I believe that's called Cementum annuli. Hopefully I said that right. I know we got some biology guys that'll probably check me up on that, but well, Tim, there's a ton more I want to talk to you about, but we're already getting long on time here. I do want to touch up on one last thing, because I know you've got so much experience in taxidermy. Can you maybe give us all some tips on, as say we are able to go back to that swamp and rattle up that buck we're looking for, and we get a mature deer? Can you maybe give us some quick tips as far as, one, finding a good taxidermist, and two, what we should do in the field if we want to get a shoulder mount or something like that done?
Okay, all right, on the taxidermist part, I would suggest to anybody that you seek out and find a state-certified taxidermist or a nationally certified taxidermist. Like, I'm a certified Georgia taxidermist. I'm a certified taxidermist with the NTA, which is the National Taxidermist Association. I'm insured and I'm bonded. And what that means is, if you carry a deer head to a taxidermist that's insured and bonded, your mount's going to be covered for the monetary value of it in case something happens, like a tornado comes through and tears his shop to pieces, or it catches fire and burns down, or just something that's beyond his control happens to your trophy. You'll at least get back the face value of the mount. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
As far, the two things you never want to do in taxidermy: don't ever price shop, and don't ever price shop. Don't go by how quick you can get it back, okay? Because it's not like calling Walmart and pricing a bottle of aspirin and then turning around and calling Kmart and pricing that same bottle of aspirin, okay? Just, if you have to pay a little more to get a good job, we've got an old saying in this business that the sweetness of low price is soon forgotten, but the bitterness of poor quality lasts forever, okay? When you're getting the animal out of the woods, the last thing you want to do is drag him on his shoulders. I mean, if you have to get some help, go in there and where you can keep his shoulders up off the ground till you can get him to the vehicle. Never tie one behind a four-wheeler or something and drag him out. If you can get him up on the four-wheeler, that's fine. If you do not know for 100% fact how to properly cape the animal for mounting, then carry it to a processor that does, and have it properly caped and carry it to your taxidermist. Here's a few other tips. 3 days in a cooler, a refrigerated cooler, is about max for a cape before you worry about it getting bacteria and spoilage or slippage. Anything after 3 days, it needs to go into a freezer and be frozen hard. Put it in a plastic trash bag and put it in the freezer until you can get it to your taxidermist.
Okay. Well, that's a lot of good information to start out with on that, and we might have to tap you again for some more turkey and
Sure.
and taxidermy info. Adam, you got anything else left for Tim?
Yeah, Tim, I just asked how you got into outdoor riding.
Well, it was just kind of it's kind of like the way I got into taxidermy. I've always had a love for the outdoors. When I was much younger, I loved to draw animals and fish. And as I got a little older, I got to where I loved to hunt a lot. And it just seemed that the art form of taxidermy seemed to be a way to meet my interests halfway, so to speak. Because in taxidermy, you have to be a little bit of everything. You have to be a plumber, an electrician, a carpenter, a sculptor, a seamstress, a painter. I may have said sculptor earlier, but you have to be a little bit of everything, to be an artist. Not everybody's cut out to be a taxidermist. It is not.
Tim, I'm thinking back over this interview, and I want to make sure we do a good job covering the rut as well. If I could just ask a couple last questions, because
sure, absolutely,
we want to make sure we're trying to get this info out for everybody in the South here. That's some of these guys have already had their rut, but I know we're just getting into the pre-rut for some areas. Can you kind of just quickly walk us through some tactics as far as starting in the pre-rut and then working through the rut, as far as how your tactics might change and what you should be looking for in the woods?
My pre-rut, I'm mainly concerned about slipping in close to bedding areas and trying to call deer because they're very callable in the pre-rut. As it gets more into the rut to where the bucks are locked down with the does, then I might be more interested in moving to a food source where I know there are doe groups hanging out, to where a buck might come in there to check the does, or I'm going to hunt travel corridors that I know bucks are going to be on their feet traveling, looking for the doe groups. And then let's see, because you got basically does are going to come into estrus every 28 days when they're not bred. So if she's not bred her first cycle, 28 days later, she, what some people call the second rut, which is usually a weaker one, because there's not as many does in heat, but there are some. But that can be a great time to hunt also, because the bucks that have survived are looking for those few does. And also your yearling does, this year's does are going to come in their estrus cycle for the very first time. I don't know if you've ever noticed it. You ever seen active paw marks during turkey season?
How about you, Adam?
Have you ever been turkey hunting and found fresh paw marks in the woods?
Yep, I've seen some.
Yeah, as long as they're hard-horned, they can breed. And you'll have young does or whatever, or even some older does that might go through several cycles before they get bred. So that's why you'll see paw marks during turkey season. And then, see, once the main rut is over, then the bucks are going to go back to basically getting on a feeding pattern, because they're trying to get back that body weight that they lost during the rut.
So let's look at the time frame a little bit, just for the sake of things, making things easy, because we all know down in the South here the rut could be anywhere from July to February, depending on where you live. So
Sure.
Just for time frame's sake, let's say the peak of your rut is November 15th. So when do you start treating that as the pre-rut area, and what do you expect seeing in the woods in that time?
Our pre-rut window here where I'm at is the last week of October, which is basically where we're at now, from the 23rd to the 31st. That window right there is I can basically attest to that by what's hanging on my wall and what I killed Friday.
Yeah.
That buck, although he was coming back to bed up, he'd been out looking. He'd been out cruising. That's what he'd been doing, and he was coming home to lay up.
And I think you mentioned when you start seeing scrapes and paw marks, that's kind of a signal to you, like, hey, the pre-rut's getting going.
That's right. They're putting down. They are establishing territories. Absolutely.
Okay.
Not to be infringed upon.
So the 22nd to the 31st, then from that point you're hitting the peak of the rut stage. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Usually the peak of the rut here for my area in Middle Georgia is going to be around November the 10th to November the 20th. That's going that window.
So
And then
about
as you
what
go
we started
farther
talking about.
south and west, see, like 3 hours from here, when you go over to Union Springs, Alabama, heck, that deer don't rut till the end of January.
Yeah.
But it's just, it's a different breed of deer. The deer down in southwest Georgia, the peak of their rut, you can just about mark it on a calendar, is going to be December the 17th, the week before Christmas. That would be for Early County, Miller County, down there around Seminole County, down in southwest Georgia.
Okay, and I believe some of the coastlands in Georgia are, that's back in October,
Early.
the peak of the rut is, right? Yeah.
Early. Theirs is done come and gone, pretty much. Yeah.
I think
Especially
Lindsey
like
Thomas,
on the
who had me
barrier
on here.
islands. They're like the barrier islands, like Blackbeard and Sapelo and Ossabaw. Yeah, theirs is early to mid-October.
All right. Well, I think that's a good quick cover of it. We might have to have you back on here in spring to talk about turkey. I really appreciate you coming on. I enjoyed the conversation a whole bunch.
Sure.
We got a lot of
Yeah.
good info out of you. So I'll look forward to seeing some more posts from you. I know you can get more than one deer on Facebook, or not on more than one deer in Georgia. So I'll be keeping my eye on Facebook, see how the rest of your season goes.
Yep. In fact, I'm going to hunt hard this week. I'm going to, as a taxidermist, Monday morning is busy. Or you hope it is. So I'll go to work in the morning, but I'll be hunting again tomorrow afternoon, and I'll probably hunt every morning and every afternoon this week for a certain amount of time. And that's why you work so hard in the off season, so you can justify being gone during deer season. You know what I'm saying?
Yep. Yeah.
That's true.
Have you seen any trends with this season as far as the deer being bigger, smaller, or more or less, or anything like that?
There seems to be more deer this year, and I have seen the most yearlings and does this year than I have ever seen. In fact, the first of bow season, I went the first 3 weeks without shooting a deer because every doe I saw had offspring with her, and I just don't like to orphan them when they're that young. And
Yeah.
most of them had twins. I saw 2 that had triplets.
Well, that's a good situation.
So-
It sounds like the coyotes aren't too
Yeah.
bad where you're at then.
Well, yeah, we of course, like my oldest son Josh, he traps on some of the properties that we hunt, so he keeps the predators down, and that's another key too,
Mm-hmm.
is just keeping your predators down.
All right, Tim. Well, we'll have you back on. We talk about turkey hunting and hog hunting as well. So I really appreciate you coming
Yeah,
on the Down
absolutely.
South podcast, and we're looking forward to talking to you again.
Same here, Tim.
Yeah, well, I appreciate y'all having me. I appreciate the opportunity. I'm just, I'm just an average Joe, and I'm just sharing with y'all what has, helped make me successful. My method's not the only way to hunt, but it's a proven method, and it works.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, Tim.
Have a good night.
Thank y'all.
Thanks, Tim.
Yes, sir. Y'all too. Bye.
Hey, Adam, I really enjoyed that interview. I've got a question for you. So, given Tim's experience and what he said, do you see yourself trying some rattling this season?
I'll admit that I already made the decision. Yeah, I was going to try it. I was going to try it pretty early. As soon as, I start thinking the rut is closing in.
You
I don't know about the whole dropping it down thing. I'm going to have to test that with maybe like some 550 cord. I'd like to see how he's doing
Yeah,
that.
I'd really like to see
Tim,
a
that'd be a
YouTube-
great
we should have
YouTube
asked
video.
him to do a YouTube video of it. That'd have been real good to see exactly how it's done. Maybe I'll text him and ask if he's got any info for that, and if so, I can add it to the show notes to this when we post it. But yeah, I'm interested as well. I was hunting the other night. This last week, I hunted one evening in the cold front, and I thought I heard a little bit of tickling of tines in the background, and I didn't even bring anything to rattle with. I brought a grunt call, and in hindsight, that probably been a good time just to try it out. So I'm definitely interested in it. I've got I'm kind of thrifty. I did my homemade rattling bag. I got a bunch of different sized like wood dowels. and some have flat ends and cut. Anyway, I cut them into short things and I put them in a sock. That's my rattling bag.
Okay, that's I think I need to see a picture of that one on
That's a
Instagram as well.
redneck hack. Maybe if I try it out in the stand, I'll try to remember to take a picture of it, throw it up on Instagram. I think it works pretty good though. It's got they're different sizes and that kind of stuff. So I think it works pretty good.
I'm a little more old school. I just use some like the old basket rack, one of the basket rack deer that I have. I just keep those hanging around,
Yeah,
tied
that's what I need
together.
to do is kill some more basket racks so I can get some rattling antlers.
And then you get an excuse to be like, man, I just need some
That's what I'm
rattling
gonna say.
antlers.
Yeah, that's gonna be the new excuse. It's not a cull buck anymore because we've talked to too many biologists to know that you can call things a cull buck just because you want to shoot a small one. So I'm just gonna say I needed some rattling antlers, so I shot this one. Hey, we got our first 4-star rating.
Ooh, didn't even notice that.
I don't know why. There was no comments with it, just a rating. So, but that being said, you know what? I'll take 4-star ratings. So if
Yeah,
you want to give us a rating, give us 4 stars. Give us 5 stars, it'd be more appreciated even. But you don't even have to put comments or anything like that. If you're just on iTunes, just give us a star rating, and that'll help us out even if you don't want to put comments. If you have anything to say though, a lot of the comments people left have been real encouraging as well. So any ratings and reviews are appreciated. Hey, anything else you want to do before we sign off here? We'll let everybody go.
No, you made a comment in the show that we're kind of noticing a similar trend with the mobile guys, and I think that's just something worth noting is, a lot of these successful hunters are being mobile.
Yeah.
And they're also hunting bedding areas close by to bedding areas. I noticed that trend a lot, and getting in as tight as possible to a bedding area. Another thing I know, reading some of Tim's stuff online, he likes to hunt different transitions within vegetation. I think he mentioned that also in the interview. So some really good takeaways from this one.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to take from it. It seems like so many of these interviews, I always listen to them more than once because we do it, and then I'm going back to edit it a lot of times. But it seems like a lot of these might be a lot of benefit if you can listen to them more than once and pick up on some of these little things these guys are doing to kill mature deer.
Definitely.
All right, man. Well, until next time, we're out down south.
Out down south.